America 250, The Dogs, Episode 10, Dogs at War. Welcome to America 250, The Dogs. War is usually told through the eyes of soldiers, through maps, battles, generals, and the nations they served. But there is another story, a story that ran through trenches, crossed battlefields, stood watch in the darkness, and followed men into places few wanted to go. A story carried on four legs. From the mud of World War I to the global battlefields of World War II, dogs were more than companions. They became messengers, sentries, rescuers, and sometimes the difference between life and death. This is the story of America's dogs at war. The story didn't begin with dogs. It began with trenches. When World War I erupted across Europe, warfare changed. Massive trench systems stretched across the landscape. Miles of mud, barbed wire, shell craters, and silence broken only by artillery fire. Soldiers lived in conditions unlike anything the world had seen before. Every day brought uncertainty. Every night brought fear. And danger came from places that couldn't always be seen. Gas attacks became one of the most terrifying weapons of the war. Poison gas drifted low across the ground, invisible at first, then deadly. Those caught without warning often had only seconds to react. But gas wasn't the only enemy. Rats flooded the trenches, drawn by food scraps, waste, and bodies that could not always be recovered. They spread disease, destroyed supplies, and turned already miserable conditions into something even worse. It was in this environment that dogs began proving their value. Some were used to control rat populations. Small, quick dogs capable of hunting where humans could not. Others served a different purpose: companionship, a familiar presence in an unfamiliar nightmare. But soldiers soon noticed something remarkable. Dogs often sensed danger first. They became alert before humans recognized a threat. They stiffened, stopped, refused to move, reacting to things their handlers couldn't yet see. Before the gas arrived, before the enemy appeared, before incoming fire could be heard. What began as companionship evolved into something far more important: awareness, warning, survival. And when the war ended, some of those dogs crossed the Atlantic alongside the soldiers who had come to depend on them. While war transformed dogs overseas, another transformation was happening at home. Most American dogs still lived much as they always had. Many remained outdoors. Many still worked. Many lived close to the family, but not necessarily inside the house. Yet change was coming. Cities were growing. Communities were becoming more organized. And for the first time, ownership itself was becoming more structured. Licensing laws spread across America. Collars and identification tags became increasingly common. Leash laws appeared in urban areas trying to manage growing populations of dogs. Responsibility was becoming part of dog ownership. Veterinary medicine was evolving as well. For much of history, veterinary care focused primarily on livestock and horses. Now, dogs were beginning to receive greater attention. Early veterinary clinics appeared. Treatments improved. Knowledge expanded. Rabies became a major focus. Vaccination efforts were developing. Not widespread yet, but increasingly available. Owners gained access to treatments for parasites, injuries, and infections that previous generations could only guess at. Feeding practices began changing. Commercial dog food, once rare, became more available. Now, more Americans could purchase food designed specifically for dogs. Organizations such as the American Kennel Club continued growing as well. Breed standards expanded. Dog shows became more popular. Dogs were increasingly defined not only by what they could do, but by what they were. The foundation of the modern American dog was quietly taking shape. When World War II began, dogs entered the conflict very differently. They were no longer an afterthought. They were organized, trained, assigned, and for the first time, dogs became part of a formal military structure. The United States Army War Dog Program, often known as the Canine Corps, transformed dogs into specialized military assets. Each role relied on abilities humans simply could not match. Messenger dogs carried information across dangerous terrain. When radio communication failed or silence was required, these dogs delivered messages that can mean the difference between success and disaster. Scout dogs moved ahead of advancing troops. Their senses often detected danger long before a human could. Sentry dogs guarded installations and camps, listening, watching, alerting, providing early warning when visibility was limited. Other dogs searched for wounded soldiers, finding men who might otherwise have been left behind. Dogs served wherever their abilities were needed most. Their impact became especially visible in the Pacific. On islands such as Guam, Doberman Pinschers worked alongside Marines. Dense jungle environments limited visibility. Danger could be only a few feet away. The dogs often detected enemy movement first, providing warnings that saved lives. Other branches used dogs in more limited ways. The Coast Guard employed them primarily for patrol and security work. The Navy and Merchant Marine often kept dogs as mascots rather than formally trained military assets. But wherever they served, the lesson was the same. Dogs excelled where human senses reached their limits, and in war, those limits mattered. While military dogs served overseas, American dogs at home experienced the war as well. Food rationing affected everyone, including pets. Owners were encouraged to stretch supplies, use leftovers, adjust feeding practices, and make the most of limited resources. At the same time, families were asked to make sacrifices. The military needed dogs, and Americans responded. Many families donated beloved pets to military training programs. Some of those dogs would serve overseas. Some would never return. It was a sacrifice that many households made willingly, believing their dogs could contribute to the war effort just as their sons, brothers, and husbands did. Meanwhile, veterinary medicine continued improving. Vaccinations became more common. Knowledge of disease expanded. Nutrition improved. Commercial dog food continued developing despite wartime shortages. Training also evolved. More Americans began viewing dogs as animals that could be trained intentionally, not simply for work, but for behavior, communication, companionship. The war changed how Americans thought about dogs, and those changes would remain long after the fighting ended. By the end of World War II, something had changed. Dogs had proven themselves, not only as companions, but as capable, trainable, dependable partners. America had witnessed what dogs could accomplish under extraordinary circumstances. They saw the loyalty, the intelligence, the courage, and the willingness to remain beside humans no matter the cost. The lessons learned during the war followed soldiers home. Training methods evolved. Expectations changed. The relationship between people and dogs deepened. At the same time, advances in veterinary medicine, nutrition, breeding, and ownership continued moving forward. Together, these changes created something new. The modern American dog, not simply a worker, not simply a protector, but a companion with a recognized place in both family life and society. For the first time in American history, dogs had earned widespread recognition, not merely for what they were, but for what they could do. War tests everything: nations, communities, families, and relationships. The world wars revealed something important about dogs. When communication failed, when danger approached, when certainty disappeared, dogs remained on battlefields, in military camps, in homes waiting for loved ones to return. They stayed, they served, they adapted, and they strengthened a bond that had been developing for thousands of years, a bond that by the middle of the 20th century was impossible to ignore. Thank you for listening to America 250, The Dogs. Join me next time as we continue exploring the remarkable dogs who helped shape modern America. Because in the moments when survival mattered most, they stayed, they served, they belonged. Because then, as now, we were a pack. I'm Andrea LaGrow, and I'll see you next time.